Greetings again everyone, John from Phone Arena here. You're watching our in-depth video comparison between the Apple iPad 2 and the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1. These are pretty much the cream of the crop in terms of tablet offerings right now in the market. They're kind of similar in many ways just because they have that razor-thin profile construction with both. They also start at $500 for the 16GB Wi-Fi only version. So we're going to compare and contrast both models to see which one has the advantages over the other. So by now, some of you are probably familiar about the background story about both tablets. We first were introduced to the Galaxy Tab 10.1 back at MWC, where it sported the larger frame. Then Apple unveiled the iPad 2 shortly afterwards, and everyone was really mesmerized by the fact it had this very thin construction and premium feel to it. It just made everyone go back to drawing boards, including Samsung, who reworked the design of the Galaxy Tab 10.1 and eventually retreated with this model here, which is the thinnest and lightest tablet out there in the market. Actually, when you put them both side by side, it's very hard to differentiate which one is actually thinner, but the Galaxy Tab just edges out the iPad 2 just by a hairline. You really can't notice it that much. In terms of overall looks, there's nothing really too spectacular with both. They're almost pretty much similar. Display with the bezel around it. The Galaxy Tab 10.1 has a 16:9 aspect ratio versus the iPad 2, which is a little bit more on the boxy side. So you do notice it a little bit wider with the Galaxy Tab, where the iPad 2 is definitely longer down this way. In terms of choice of materials, we definitely like the iPad 2 just because it has that metallic brushed aluminum back cover, which gives you a sense of premium feel all around, whereas the Galaxy Tab 10.1 relies on the plasticky nature of the back cover here with the silver accents. It's worth noting that they're going to come out with a metallic gray version, but this one here doesn't quite exhibit the same polished feel as the iPad 2. So overall, we still have to hand it to Apple. They really crafted a beautiful device, and from head to toe, it exudes a lot of premium feel everywhere you look at it. We really have to admit, but these two tablets utilize the best displays out there that you could find. Definitely beats out other stuff that we've seen, such as the Zoom, the G Slate, and even some Windows tablets out there. The Galaxy Tab 10.1 has a 10.1-inch display as opposed to the 9.7-inch of the iPad 2. The resolution for the Galaxy Tab 10.1 is 1280 by 800 pixels as opposed to the 1024 by 768 resolution of the iPad 2. Still, both produce a lot of nice-looking details. You can make out everything on screen, and they produce such distinctive and deep colors. It's really something that stands out when you first look at both. But we didn't have any issues using them in outdoor conditions. They produce a lot of luminance, so easily seen in pretty much any lighting condition out there. But we still have to hand it slightly to the iPad 2 just because it does produce a little bit more natural looking colors as opposed to the really deep and saturated looks of the Galaxy Tab 10.1. As we mentioned already, both have wonderful looking displays. We're just going to show you a few different images just to give you a better indication of what kind of color production you can expect with both. Left being the iPad 2, the right being the Galaxy Tab 10.1. In this first image, pretty nice colors with both, but the Galaxy Tab 10.1 has a slightly deeper tones with it. Here are some magenta colors, pretty much hard to distinguish here through the video, but when you look at that dead on, you kind of notice that the color tones with the iPad 2 are a little bit on the neutral side, whereas the Galaxy Tab 10.1 is deeper and stronger tones. Some might find it appealing, but in terms of being more natural, the iPad 2 definitely is in that area, especially with lighter colors. You notice it a little bit more there. And we'll quickly show you what we're talking about here. If you launch the browser here and just go to Google's website, you'll notice with the iPad 2, it has this more natural tone where the Galaxy Tab in the white has a bluish tinge to it, but you definitely notice that just because of the richness in colors you see, and sometimes you perceive the white on the iPad 2 to be a little bit more on the yellowish side, but it's actually on the neutral tone. Right on top of their displays, you'll find both have front-facing cameras. The iPad 2 has a smaller VGA camera, 0.3 megapixels, whereas the Galaxy Tab 10.1 is a larger one at 2 megapixels. As for their dedicated power buttons, we like the feel of both. They have the iPad 2 slightly raised a little bit more, but you still can feel both out. They both offer a pretty good tactile response when you press them down. Moreover, you could say the same thing about their volume rockers. They're pretty narrow looking, but they have a really distinctive feel. But the iPad 2 is slightly more jutted out more than anything, but they still offer a really nice responsive feel when you push them down. Meanwhile, at the bottom edge of both tablets, you have their proprietary connection ports for data and power. At the same time, they are both the same thing used if you want to output video to a high-definition television set. The iPad 2, you got to purchase a separate dongle accessory, where the Galaxy Tab 10.1, you're probably going to have to connect it with a dock of some sort. In the rear, you have their autofocus cameras. With the Galaxy Tab 10.1, it uses a bigger sensor, a 3.2 megapixel one, versus the less than 1 megapixel count on the iPad 2. The advantage with the Galaxy Tab 10.1 is that it offers also an LED flash. The iPad 2 has only one single speaker, which is found in the back corner of the tablet, where the Galaxy Tab 10.1 has two speakers, both left and right, on its sides. It's worth noting that with both tablets, you don't have access to their batteries, and at the same time, they don't offer any additional support for additional storage capacity, so you're stuck with whatever one you choose from the beginning. Next, we'll talk about the speed and performance of both tablets, and actually they're quite similar just because they use dual-core processors. With the Galaxy Tab 10.1, it's actually the NVIDIA Tegra 2 chipset, and the iPad 2, it's the Apple A5 processor. So both offer a pretty good experience as far as just navigating across their home screens, even other basic operations like kinetic scrolling and even opening up apps. It's pretty much instantaneous, and we like the fact that they offer a pretty good experience in pretty much anything that you do. But between the two, you kind of notice the iPad 2 has slightly more responsive feel, tighter than the Galaxy Tab, just because even in portrait usage, we don't notice any lagginess, which is something you kind of still see with the Galaxy Tab 10.1 when you navigate across the home screen. But still, both are pretty respectable, but the iPad 2 has those fluid tendencies more than the Galaxy Tab 10.1. Ultimately, it's going to come down to which platform experience you prefer more. On one hand, the iPad 2 is the more straightforward and easier one to handle just because it's simplistic by nature, whereas the Honeycomb 3.1, Android 3.1 on the Galaxy Tab 10.1, it has its complexities, but still we like its level of personalization. You can see that evident with the abundance of different widgets. Some of them are nice just because you can resize them and just get a lot of useful stuff directly on the home screen as opposed to launching an application. Where in the iPad 2, the only type of personalization you can find is just changing the lock screen and even the background wallpaper. That's pretty much it. Also, with Galaxy Tab 10.1, we like its notifications implementation a lot better than the iPad 2. The same thing applies with its multitasking elements. You just have this really quick scrollable listing with the Galaxy Tab 10.1, where with the iPad 2, you have to actually double click the home button to gain access to all of them. It's a little bit easier and a lot more intuitive with the Galaxy Tab 10.1. The app panel is pretty much straightforward. You have just some of the icons in a grid-like format. And all in all, we definitely still like the fact that Android 3.1 Honeycomb on the Galaxy Tab 10.1 just offers a superior level of personalization and usefulness with its platform implementation. When it comes to inputting text, neither one has an advantage over the other, just because the keyboards are more than responsive with both. You could tell just by quickly tapping here, it's pretty much instantaneous, barely any delay. Speed typers will definitely like it. A little bit better with the landscape option, just because it's a little bit more roomy. But overall, neither one has a better one than the other. If you happen to be a big user of Gmail, it's no-brainer that the Galaxy Tab 10.1 offers a better experience than the iPad 2, just because you have those rich set of features that you find commonly in any Android device. You can tell the layout is pretty much similar. They utilize this two-panel layout, the left being your scrollable inbox, and when you make a selection, it displays the email in the right panel. They both work essentially the same, but you just have that added set of features with the Gmail experience on the Galaxy Tab 10.1. When it comes to web browsing, definitely the Galaxy Tab 10.1 gives you that desktop-like experience just because it has added flash support where it's missing on the iPad 2. But between the two, you could still tell that the iPad 2 offers a little bit better fluid movements with its operation, from kinetic scrolling to pinch gestures. It's just a little bit more fluid in its overall operation. But still, we like the fact that the Galaxy Tab 10.1 just gives you that true desktop-like experience. Naturally, we still like the visual presentation of the music player on the Galaxy Tab 10.1 just because it has this really nice 3D carousel effect. Just adds that nice visual flair to it, whereas the iPad 2, you don't see cover flow, you just pretty much have a static view of your albums and songs and all that stuff, so nothing really too different. As far as the audio quality from the actual speaker, we have to hand it to the iPad 2 just because you have these bass tones that sound a little bit more deeper than the Galaxy Tab 10.1, which is a little bit more on the neutral side. There's no denying it. If you want to shoot photos, you want to stick with the Galaxy Tab 10.1 because its 3.2 megapixel camera does a far better job than the iPad 2. You have the samples here with the iPad 2 on the left, and on the right, the Galaxy Tab 10.1. With this macro shot, you could tell level of clarity between the two. It's a little bit more haze and fuzziness going on with the iPad 2 shots. So let's go look at additional photos here. Here's a macro shot. You could tell too that it looks a little bit more muddy with the iPad 2, a lot better details with the Galaxy Tab 10.1. It also does a lot better job in low lighting situations. You don't see as much digital noise. On top of that, in outdoor conditions, the color production looks a lot better, a little bit more distinctive with the Galaxy Tab 10.1. It just seems a little bit more mundane and kind of washed out looking with the iPad 2. Also, when it comes to shooting high-definition video, the Galaxy Tab 10.1 is far superior to the iPad 2, just because overall it just looks a lot better. They both shoot 720p, a really good frame rate to it, but you can tell as it's panning here in a second, the iPad 2 is a little bit more gracious and more fluid with its movement. A little bit of stutteriness with the Galaxy Tab 10.1, still more than acceptable, but there's just a lot more detail with the Galaxy Tab 10.1's production, and we like the level of exposure. It's not abrupt. They're both pretty nice, but as far as just overall looks, we gotta hand it to the Galaxy Tab 10.1 on this one. As for battery life, you'll easily get a solid day's usage with both tablets, so you don't have to worry about recharging it. So you could unplug it from the time you wake up. You could not worry about it throughout the day. But in our experience, just using both tablets normally, it just seems like the iPad 2 has a slight advantage. It does edge it out just in terms of normal operation. So there you go, guys. That wraps up our video comparison between the two. And as you've seen, there are advantages and disadvantages with each. With the iPad 2, we definitely like its design a little bit more. Yeah, that polish and premium feel to it versus the Galaxy Tab. And the iOS experience is pretty much straightforward and easy to understand. With the Galaxy Tab 10.1, it offers a lot of personalization. Also has the prestigious title of being the thinnest and lightest tablet on the market. Although its build quality is not on par with the iPad 2's stellar design and choice of materials, but still nonetheless a respectable offering. As we mentioned already, a lot of personalization with Android 3.1 Honeycomb, and a little bit more complex in nature, but still we like the usefulness of the platform. But if you want to have more, if you're more into optimized apps, the iPad 2 has just a lot more in the App Store versus what's seen in the Android market for the Galaxy Tab 10.1. Although we have to recommend the Galaxy Tab 10.1 if you're going to be more into shooting photos and videos. Its camera is far superior. But either way, both are wonderful tablets, both priced evenly, $500 starting off. So either way, you really can't beat purchasing either. So if you'd like to learn more about both tablets, you could check out our website, phonearena.com. Thanks for watching, guys.